certain you're familiar with the term thalassophobia. It has gained significant popularity on the internet in recent years, and for good reason. Typically, phobias are associated with irrational or exaggerated fears, but I can confidently assert that fearing the sea is neither irrational nor unfounded. The ocean is, in essence, an abyss, a vast, unfathomably deep, impenetrably dark, and inhospitable realm. The immense pressure, absence of light, and numerous other hostile conditions make it a place one should approach with caution. Yet every year, thousands of people venture into the depths through activities like diving or cruise trips. And let's not forget the individuals whose professional duties require them to descend deep underwater in submarines for research or defense purposes. Now let me share two incidents that have been weighing on me for quite some time. Regrettably, I cannot confide in my friends, family, or even a therapist, as discussing these matters might result in being labeled as deranged. My recollection takes me back to my elementary school days, likely no later than the 4th grade, although some details may be a bit hazy, given that more than 30 years have passed. I had been attending an after-school swimming course for several weeks, eagerly working toward passing the test that would grant me access to the deep end of the pool, which reached a maximum depth of approximately 11 feet. The primary motivation behind this endeavor was the fact that my then coolest friends were already enrolled in deep-end lessons. Imagine my excitement when I arrived for my first class, seeing my name on the board for the deep-end lesson schedule and activities. The initial moments of the class unfolded quite routinely. Instructors explained the day's plans, including a game we would play if we behaved well during the lesson. A challenging feat for a group of energetic elementary school children. But that's just kids being kids. My first task of the day was to practice proper diving form. We took turns on the starting blocks, diving in one by one, with instructors providing feedback and guidance after each attempt to help us improve. I was filled with an overwhelming mix of excitement and nervousness as the instructor delivered her directions. While she stood at the pool's edge, I couldn't help but glance behind her. The water possessed a deep, cobalt hue, its appearance both murky and paradoxically clear, thanks to the bottom lights illuminating its eerie depths. Despite a nagging sense of unease, I pushed those feelings aside. It was just a pool, right? What could possibly go wrong? My turn finally arrived to execute my dive, with my friends cheering me on. As I positioned myself in the best form I could muster, I gazed downward, observing the blue abyss patiently awaiting my arrival. However, something felt off in that moment. I couldn't quite pinpoint it, but an unsettling feeling crept over me. Nevertheless, with all eyes on me and not wanting to delay the class, I propelled myself forward and dived in, the sound of the splash distorted as I descended below the surface. The water's cool and soothing touch enveloped my skin, and my eyes remained closed as I sank several feet below, savoring the euphoria of the depth. But I knew I couldn't linger underwater for too long, lest I incur the instructor's reprimand. So I opened my eyes, intending to glance upwards and return to the surface. However, when I strained to look, I couldn't help but emit a startled gasp, bubbling up from my lips. Above me, the surface didn't appear to be just a few feet away. It seemed to stretch over 40 feet or more. I couldn't fathom how this was possible, and panic began to set in. This panic escalated when I dared to glance below and around me. Turning my head left and right, I saw no pool walls, no discernible patterns or tiles, only an unending expanse of cobalt blue in every direction. If I had truly descended as far as I surmised, I expected my ears to pop or feel some pressure on my fragile young body. But there I floated, seemingly weightless. I seized the moment to peer downward, a mistake so horrifying and stress-inducing that I'm convinced it took a toll on my lifespan. Below me, the water dropped into an unfathomable abyss, the depth immeasurable, plunging beyond comprehension. All I could perceive was the gradual descent of the deep blue, sinking further and further until it transformed into impenetrable darkness, a well-known abyss. I found myself suspended in its midst, and although only a few seconds passed, they felt like endless minutes in the hushed depths. My focus urgently returned to the surface, and I kicked with desperation, releasing bubbles that nearly obscured my vision. I emitted futile screams for assistance, beseeching any deity who might be listening to free me from this nightmarish ordeal. Every stroke and kick was a struggle for survival. The most harrowing part was that my own pleas for my mother were barely audible amidst the watery silence. The surface seemed almost unreachable, while my impending drowning loomed closer. My lungs seared with pain, and I could feel myself slipping away, my hand fruitlessly grasping at the surface as if begging for mercy. I believed this would be my end, that I would perish in that moment, and my lifeless body would drift aimlessly in the abyss of blue and black. My eyes began to close involuntarily as my lungs tightened agonizingly with each passing second. Just as darkness threatened to engulf my vision permanently, and I prepared to make my final plea for help, an intense and familiar sensation struck me. Suddenly, I broke through the water's surface. Strong hands gripped my shoulders, their fingers pressing firmly against my skin as they forcefully pulled me upward. As my eyes reopened, I was met with a sight that simultaneously brought relief and confusion. It was the ceiling of the indoor pool I had been in just moments ago. A stern female voice pierced my ears as I coughed up water and spat it out. That was reckless and could have had dire consequences. You shouldn't stay submerged for so long after a dive. You're sitting out for the rest of the day. The voice belonged to my swimming instructor. I absent-mindedly absorbed her words, my hands pressing against the solid tile floor beneath me, providing a profound sense of relief I hadn't thought possible. "Did you hear me, Jackson? You're done for the rest of the day," she scolded. But my overwhelming terror and confusion overshadowed any concern for the discipline I had just received. What I did manage to grasp, however, was that I had just encountered something profoundly strange and inexplicable, a true call of the void. When I returned home later that same day and attempted to relay the experience to my parents, their response was dismissive, chalking it up to the overactive imagination of a young child. I probably should have expected as much. Nevertheless, I learned from that encounter, which is why I've kept it to myself all these years until now. I can't entirely fault my parents or anyone else for their skepticism. I, too, had a hard time believing it despite being the one who lived through it. The days following that incident were the toughest. I promptly quit my swimming class, much to the dismay of my parents and friends. Moreover, I made a conscious effort to steer clear of any sizable bodies of water, although I didn't live near many. Pools, lakes, and rivers were strictly off limits for me. Even when it came to bathing, I restricted myself to showers only. Baths were out of the question. I managed to bury that memory as deep as possible within the recesses of my mind. Yet here I am, sharing it with you now. Clearly my attempts at suppression didn't succeed, along with my newfound fear of water deeper than a few inches. Apart from my heightened aversion to bodies of water, my life unfolded relatively normally. I completed elementary school and transitioned to middle school, making friends, going on trips, getting into occasional trouble, all part of the typical teenage experience. Things were going quite well, and I had nearly succeeded in moving on from that traumatic experience. That is, until the second incident occurred. You see, not long after I finished the 8th grade, my grandmother passed away. Her death hit me like a ton of bricks, as I held only cherished memories of her, and she had cherished me as her grandson. She was a loving, kind, and dignified woman. Part of me found solace in the thought that she would finally be reunited with my grandfather, as his passing a few years prior had deeply affected her. Both of them had been exceptionally positive role models in my early life. While she had always maintained a cheerful and upbeat demeanor, there were moments when she allowed her vulnerability to show, and those moments were entirely understandable. According to my mother, he was always an exceptional husband and a caring father. About a week following her passing, my group of friends from that time invited me to a pool party at their residence. Surprisingly, I didn't have much hesitation in accepting the invitation. I believed that engaging in social interactions would help divert my thoughts from the grief, and it seemed like a better choice to have some fun. The initial traumatic incident had been buried deep within my psyche over time, though I still experienced anxiety when confronted with images or videos featuring deep water. I had given up trying to find rational explanations for what had occurred. You see, one of my friends was a passionate swimmer, and his family was quite affluent, which always made me wonder why he hadn't attended a private school. Their pool was impressively deep, reaching over 9 feet at the deepest end, allowing them to have a diving board. It was impeccably maintained and appeared more inviting than most public pools, with its enchanting sapphire blue water. When I arrived at the party, a faint unease crept into my stomach as I caught sight of the pool. However, as I began conversing and joking with my friends, that unease gradually dissipated. Although I stayed on the pavement a few feet away, clutching my cup of punch and chatting with my peers, I hadn't entered the pool for a while. It wasn't until my longtime crush at the time, Jennifer, began teasing me about my hesitancy that I seriously contemplated taking a dip. After all those years, it was peer pressure that finally convinced me. She playfully taunted me, saying, "Come on, Jackson, you're going to turn to dust if you just keep standing around up there." She gazed up at me with a mixture of curiosity and subtle mischief, causing me to smile. I tried to maintain a facade of composure, but it didn't last long as a few of my other friends joined Jennifer in their playful chants. "Jump in, Jackson, jump in, Jackson, jump in, Jackson." So I strolled over to a nearby table, set my cup down, turned around, and without allowing myself any further hesitation, I sprinted and cannonballed right into the water. It had been such a long time since I'd felt the sensation of being submerged, but the pleasantly lukewarm water provided an unexpected sense of comfort. A welcome departure from the scorching and muggy weather that had persisted throughout the day. Naturally, as I cannonballed in, my eyes squeezed shut before I leaped off the pavement's edge into the pool. They remained closed for just a fleeting moment after I broke through the water's surface, much like my previous jumps. I felt myself descend a few feet and assumed I would quickly resurface. After all, I hadn't forgotten how to swim in the years since the initial incident. Yet, when I finally opened my eyes, my heart plummeted into my stomach, setting off a tumultuous churn. Glancing downward, all I could see was water. No tiles, concrete, or any semblance of a floor. Just an inky abyss, suspended above which I found myself. I couldn't help but emit a shriek of pure terror, reminiscent of a startled child, perhaps not too far from the truth. I remained suspended there, grappling with the nightmarish scenario I believed I had long left behind. Frantically scanning upwards, I observed that, much like before, I was submerged approximately 40 feet below the surface. Despite my heightened state of mind, I wasted no time, commencing a desperate swim towards it, hoping for a more favorable outcome this time. However, after just a few seconds, an unseen force abruptly halted my frantic escape. My eyes beheld an enigmatic sight, puzzling both my brain and my senses. To my right and left, I beheld what appeared to be a towering, expansive arrangement of grayish squares, encircling me in a complete 360-degree panorama. Each section of this enigmatic wall seemed to be over 100 feet away from my suspended position. As my eyes gradually adjusted to the dim conditions, the details became somewhat clearer. I cast a brief glance downward, a decision that would consume precious time. The wall on all sides extended as far as I could discern below me, descending into the abyss beneath my feet. Returning my gaze upward, I noticed that the portion of the wall closer to the water's surface exhibited a slight inward curvature, resembling a hyperboloid shape. At that moment, I wasn't methodically analyzing the intricate aspects of my predicament. Instead, I was frantically swiveling my head, desperately seeking answers within my nightmarish surroundings. With each passing second, my sense of urgency intensified, and my lungs strained, leaving me with no time to uncover the enigma surrounding me. At that moment, I should have chosen to keep swimming upward without hesitation, never once glancing back, or in this particular case, downward. My fate might have taken a different turn if I hadn't caught wind of something that sent a shiver through me, as if I were submerged in icy Arctic waters. "Jackson?" A feeble, frail voice echoed through the water around me, startlingly clear. It sounded too distinct to be originating from the submerged surroundings. It felt as though someone were calling my name from an empty corridor, rather than from over 36 feet underwater. In that moment, I couldn't fathom what to make of it, my thoughts racing as I continued my ascent. My legs kicked harder, my anxiety surging, and I couldn't discern whether the pain in my chest was my lungs constricting or bile threatening to surge from my throat. Perhaps it was a blend of both. "Jackson, don't leave, Jackson!" the voice repeated, once again crystal clear and easy to comprehend. This allowed me to pinpoint both the source and identity. As I made my way toward the surface, I cast a downward glance and witnessed a chilling sight between my swiftly moving feet. Several dozen feet below, there appeared to be my recently departed grandmother, or some grotesque semblance of her, ensnared by a thick metallic chain that prevented any upward movement. Her eyes were completely clouded over, as though they had been sketched with white chalk. Her skin was deeply wrinkled, and her long, disheveled white hair drifted above her head, giving her an almost Medusa-like appearance. I knew it couldn't truly be her. It was merely another facet of this horrifying nightmare from which I desperately needed to break free. Yet my ascent mirrored my previous attempt, my lungs constricting even harder, and I felt my grip on consciousness slipping as darkness overcame me. I fought against the pain with every ounce of strength I had, but it proved insufficient, and I was all too aware of that fact. I just couldn't bring myself to accept it. A few more seconds passed, and everything faded to black, a simple, agonizing loss of consciousness. Unlike the previous time, when I had felt myself breach the water's surface and emerged in a fit of coughing, I found myself abruptly awakening, gazing at the night sky. The starlight beamed down upon me as I lay on hard pavement, my back and legs aching. To my left and right, I saw my friend, the host of the pool party, along with a few other guests. They all gazed down at me, their faces displaying a range of concern. In an instant, I found myself back at square one. The weeks that followed were nothing short of bewildering. I attended my grandmother's funeral, but throughout the entire ceremony I couldn't shake the haunting image of her monstrous doppelganger from the abyss. Oddly enough, my emotions weren't overtly sorrowful during our departure, a sentiment that might sound callous at first glance. However, I remained steadfast in my unwavering love and respect for her memory. The enigmatic phenomenon that had taken hold of me persisted, and at one point I believed I could unravel its secrets. Sadly, years into my adult life, I had uncovered nothing. No answers, no concrete proof that my experiences were not isolated incidents. I scoured through countless books and combed numerous websites, albeit not with the deepest of research, I admit. What baffled me most was the question of why this peculiar ordeal was exclusive to me. Were there unseen forces at play, or was it perhaps a form of punishment for some transgression I had committed? I was not one to readily embrace the concept of curses, but after that initial incident, I found myself open to the possibility. What had triggered this sudden affliction? What had changed that caused me to endure this torment each time I immersed myself in water, despite months of uneventful swimming before the first incident? It was a source of immense frustration and hopelessness, not being able to unearth any answers or solutions. Even discovering just one other person who shared my predicament would have brought a glimmer of reassurance, yet I found no one. A strange force had marked me, and the universe refused to provide me with the mercy of an explanation regarding the why or how. Nonetheless, I delved deeper into the annals of thalassophobia. While it lacked the extensive resources available for common phobias like arachnophobia or claustrophobia, there was still ample material to occupy my time. I sifted through the expected fare, archaic accounts and transcribed logs from sailors and seafarers, maritime myths like Moby Dick and the Kraken. However, what truly intrigued me were the depictions of the deep sea. Whether they were authentic photographs or hyper-realistic artwork, they elicited an eerie, disquieting, yet morbidly captivating sensation within me. I found myself browsing through several profound underwater photographs, and each time it felt as though I were peering directly into the abyss, and it, in turn, gazed back at me. You might assume that given my past experiences, the last thing I desire is to encounter such imagery, but I couldn't escape the sensation that it was attempting to convey something to me. By it, I'm alluding to the unfathomable depths. Was I losing my grip on reality? Perhaps. I was caught in a quandary, uncertain about how to interpret this perplexing behavior. On certain days, my fear took the upper hand over my curiosity, while on others, it was the opposite. They often claim that space represents the ultimate frontier, but I would respectfully disagree. Is space vaster? Undoubtedly. Is it more desolate? Absolutely. However, if I were compelled to make a choice between being marooned in space and being adrift at sea, I'd opt for the cosmos any day. At least up there I have the company of stars and other sources of illumination to help preserve my sanity. They serve as a constant reminder that my eyesight remains functional. Yet in the deep blue depths, I'm deprived of such a luxury. It's an interminable expanse of blue and black, stretching into eternity. Like a black hole, it's a void that swallows you whole and never, ever spits you back out.